morning to one and all. This is a beautiful day and a lovely setting just to be alive and present. I'm using this mic because I don't have the voice that Ayanda has. But anyway, let's get going. IHER's group, the history and the current operations. I'm honored to be here today to share the story of our family business, which has been part of this community for about 100 years. As someone who's deeply involved in the growth of the business, I will be relating in the first person at times, not to bring undue attention to myself, but to convey the journey of IHER's through my experiences. Today's talk will provide a brief overview of the IHER's group, focusing on its history and its current operational activities. We will specifically look at IHER's supermarket, IHER's cash and carry, and IHER's best build. I must emphasize that IHER's do not belong to any franchise with a back-end supply model. I must also add that independent FMCG retailers, that's also known as fast-moving consumer goods, are making their presence felt, especially in KZN. I will touch briefly on this later. All goods are procured and stored on site. IHER's supermarket is a fully fledged retail FMCG store focusing primarily on food and has approximately 15,000 active lines. IHER's cash and carry is a hybrid wholesale retail business. This store is focused on B2B and B2C businesses. I would like to state that this concept was foreign at the inception time. Lots of my contemporaries frowned on this concept at the time. However, it continues to thrive. IHER's Best Build serves the building industry and the DIY arena. The business of selling durables is a lesson in resilience. So IHER's Best Build is a tough business to be in. The most important element of any business is its people, then its supplier of goods, and then the customer. Without that order being in place, one does not have any business. IHER's group currently employs approximately 450 people. We take on approximately 30 interns on an annual basis. These kids are new to the formal work environment and are introduced to the concept of work. This affords the company to bring in younger people that appear to be more savvy and ready to take new challenges. We have a dedicated employee training facility where tuition is carried out throughout the tenure of the learnership. My view is that independent retailers employed up to 30% more from their local communities than national retailers. We are also proud to say that our longest serving employee with unbroken service was 55 years. She came to work aged 18, escorted in by her dad. She worked a day and then made a run for it. She was marched in 2 days later and didn't miss a step for the next 55 years. The history of the group. IHER's was founded without any particular vision or mission. These words were non-existent at the time. My foray into the business began in 1985. Basically just to lend a hand. I must add, I was seen as a bit of a disruptor and a troublemaker. The business operated from a fruit and vegetable outlet in the lower part of Pine Street. The total head count may have been 10, consisting mainly of family members. The only objective was to be engaged in some activity to sustain oneself. The business at that time was steeped in the procurement and sale of fresh produce. The addition of one more created idle capacity. So a 3-ton Mitsubishi Canter was purchased from MAS to initiate something more. The cost was a princely sum of 12,000 Rand. The salesman was Don Blacklaw. My first trip to Wiener was to purchase 200 bags of potatoes. The farmer was a very taciturn Gert van der Westhuizen. The workers were lined up, and the potatoes came in like a tsunami. On the way back from Wiener, the vehicle struggled up the hills and leaned horribly, thinking that it was going to capsize. Our fear was palpable. You can imagine our relief on getting back to Greytown, drenched in perspiration from fear. Then the phone rang. Mr. van der Westhuizen on the other side. You boys loaded 400 potatoes instead of 200. So the reason for the overload dawned upon us. We paid him on the next visit, and we are still doing business to this day with his son. I spent lots of days and nights driving rigs, fetching produce from Johannesburg and as far as Western Free State. We could spend days and nights sleeping in the bunks of these trucks. On the big step, a site was purchased in Voortrekker Street. My vivid memory was clearing the site with our trusty Caterpillar front-end loader and felling some huge gum trees opposite Telkom Exchange. A long chain was strung to the highest point, and one of the patriarchs would cut away at the trunk, and at the most opportune moment, I would step on the gas. After the new store was built, it was decided to mix the merchandise a bit. As a startup, you are clueless on who the go-to people are. We crossed the first hurdle with gondola shelving from the then LA Brazier from Pietermaritzburg. We built all our high-back displays from scratch, designing using sketches on graph paper, cutting steel using an off-cut machine, welding and using stainless sheeting, for the surfaces. All additional display units were made by hand. Once a racking is laid out, we needed a supplier. So we invited a local owner of a large wholesaler. I waited the whole day for him to turn up. So he pitched up surreptitiously at night, saying he didn't want the other established retailers to see him visiting our premises. So we stocked up using another wholesaler from Pietermaritzburg. So we were given a 7-day account with a 1% discount. At the rear end of the floor was a bulk store of 120 square meters. That was our then cash and carry. Then we opened the store after placing an ad in the local Greytown Gazette in the classifieds. The cost of the advert was 8 rand. Everything went wrong in the first week. From incorrect pricing to non-pricing to non-scanning, you name it and it happened. So we closed the doors for another week to hide our embarrassment. Just to get a bit more organized. Then we opened again. This time we got off to a better start. We had to learn quickly every day. We were absolutely green and inexperienced. The crucial thing we overlooked, that we had to restock goods that were sold, and that function was non-existent. We didn't know the difference between Sunlight soap and Royco soup. An important human aspect I won't forget was the encouragement that we received from our local community. I went about introducing myself at least to one person every hour. We had a few breakthroughs along the way. I must also relate a story that we often laugh about. No sooner than we set up shop, somebody put up a few chicken cages outside the store to ply the trade, selling live chickens. We were having none of that. So under the cover of darkness, we dropped this cage off at Mr. Bagwandi's store. He was our friend, but also a very astute businessman. A few days later, we visited him, and he was beaming with a smile and proudly showing off his live chicken business. This taught me a lesson. When life gives you lemons, you know the rest. Now back to the main story. The size of the store was increased in about 2004, and the business doubled in output. However, when you double, you just get out of hand. But we managed that. In 2007, we opened here's Cash and Carry, and it was well positioned to serve the commuter market. We had constructed a covered shelter for customer comfort, and this was a great selling point. The floor was cast with post-tension cables, and I had called an engineer to use X-ray equipment to core the floor for drains for refrigeration. And this wasn't the real plan for the whole business. I recall one of the patriarchs didn't talk to me for 3 months because I had different ideas, on his direction. However, this business continues to flourish up to today. So it's 2020. Now in the 2020s, we decide to do a revamp of Ahere's supermarket and budgeted that we may need 60% of the savings of the last 20 years. So the works begin in early 2021, and in April it's doom and gloom due to the lockdown and compounded by civil unrest later. However, we soldier on, and it's now December, and the revamp looks great, but nothing dramatic happens to the business growth. Absolutely nothing. Everything was like it was before. For the next 7 months, I felt that I blew the entire reserves, and the final cost was double of the intended amount, and had nothing to show for it. And there was no place to hide. However, after 8 months, I think it was like a July or August, we experienced an uptick in business, which was totally contrary to expectations, and a smile returned. I still search my mind for reasons for this, and I presume that customers needed or felt that they needed to pick up the tab for the revamp, and that's why they were a little reserved to support openly. The burning question is, how do we remain competitive and relevant to our market? As an independent, one does have an advantage. One has absolute flexibility. Independents have grown in the last decade, and large suppliers are taking notice. In our business, we've introduced the concept of momentum of consumption. So you make your consumables more often, more affordable, so that customers consume more and buy more. Focusing on stock turn, example, a 10% margin turned 12 times will yield a return of 120%. So the working class needs low prices, and the affluent like low prices. The sum of many zeros starts off with a few zeros. The businesses are well documented, and we release monthly P&Ls and the vital ratios, not later than 10 days after each month-end run. The focus is on rand profit, not on percentages. On the future, a big family business is a complex set of variables, especially when charting a path forward and deciding on its direction. However, the underlying elements must be all-enduring, nimble, agile, abundant enthusiasm, great customer service, good housekeeping, good quality, a listening ear, and reasonable everyday prices. In conclusion, I look forward to every day as though it's my first day at work. Thank you for listening. Are there any questions? I have focused on the flora.
If I can just say something of an